from The Simpsons. And if you're curious about other videos on predictions on The Simpsons, there's a huge amount online. And we got to start with Mr. George.
Stouffville, Toyota. I'm going to give away a secret, everybody. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm going to show you my ace out of my sleeve. There it is. Are you ready for this? My special gentleman out in the way west, in the wild west. My man Ian, my man Jeff, the Auto Hub Show people. These gentlemen are all about the customer experience. They're all about mentors. They're one of my mentors, people. Gentlemen, Ian, Jeff, you're truly one of my mentors. You're mentors to me and hundreds of people across the car business, from the East Coast, the West Coast, the North Pole, the South Pole. I've been on your show all the way from Greece. Gentlemen, you're looking for the best of the best in the car business. You're looking for the best show in the business. The Auto Hub Show. A man Ian, a man Jeff. One man, one place. George Saraglu, Stouffville, Toyota.
Thanks, George. So we got some books for this week. These are thanks to Jeff. So we've got Crazy Shit Car Dealers Do, Car Business 101, Clean Disruption. We are going to be doing a show later this year on EVs, just so you know. Got some interesting guests for that. And Like I See It, which is the future of retail automotive. Disclaimer, go ahead, Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. As we always like to start our show with our legal butt covering. So just so everybody knows, the opinions expressed here are that of our guests and don't necessarily reflect our official policy or position, but what the heck, sometimes it actually does, but we just won't admit to it. So there you go. So moving right along, last week we had, just very quickly, we had our investing in your future in the in automotive. We had a couple of people on board, and it was a very interesting show, and please check it out on our recordings. And today's show is 2021 going to be truly better than 2020. And we have three very, very distinguished guests, gentlemen. I hope you like being called distinguished. We have, first of all, with the greatest title of anybody we've ever had in our show, is Matthew Groden, the answer of all automotive retail. I don't know if it's all automotive, that's my line, from Google themselves, the Uber Lord. Matthew, could you take a moment and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Yes. Well, it's kind of in many ways, my job is to be that human interface of Google, right? Instead of people going and asking Google the question, they end up asking me the question. And so it seemed like that's how I spent most of my time. That's how I spend most of my days, is answering questions that either come in through sessions like this or just show up in my inbox. I sometimes describe myself as a bit of a great white buffalo, in that I've now worked in the digital space for over a quarter of a century. And I say that usually very specifically to point out that nothing about digital is new. It's not new media anymore. It's actually old media. It's just, the media that keeps changing. So for the last 6 years, I've been at Google, and that's really when my answering of automotive retail questions began and continues through to today.
Terrific. Is it true that part of your contract that you refused to sign was changing your last name to Google?
Ha ha ha. No, I have to do that later. I think that comes later.
There you go. And secondly, we have Paul, the Dodge Father Long, the man of all Dodges from Chatham Chrysler in Chatham, Ontario. Hi, Paul. Thanks for joining us, and give us a brief introduction to yourself.
Well, I've been in the industry roughly about 3 years now, mostly with Chrysler. Was a Mopar no car guy since I was a kid. Tried a brief stint at Jag Land Rover, just wasn't me. So went back to what I knew, Dodge, and been just following, the reins of social media. It seems to be what you got to do to get yourself out there and break yourself apart from the rest of them out there. So.
Perfect. If you do a video and do a shout out to us, we can feature you there instead of George. Um,
Okay.
And then last but certainly not least, John McDonald, the gentleman who I know well, the general manager of ADESA Vancouver, Richmond, British Columbia Public Auto Auction. And John, thanks for joining our show. If you could just fill everybody in a little bit on yourself.
Sure, yeah, great to be with you all this morning. Yeah, I've been with the auction business since 1996, so seen a few changes through Edmonton, Alberta, now into BC. So yeah, it's exciting to be a part of a growing and a resilient industry. So here we are today, share some thoughts and ideas.
Appreciate it.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for attending. Thanks all of our audience for joining us. Some familiar faces out there, and I'm not going to do shout outs anymore. People get mad at me, so no, they don't. But we'll get right into it. So 12:01 a.m., January 1st, 2021. Everybody around the world, about, I don't know, about 6.5 billion of us said, thank heaven that's over. Has anything changed for the better in the business? For the worse? Has anything changed at all? We'll start with John.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think nothing's changed and everything has changed, I think, is what's happened for our business. And I think through in March, obviously, when we had the massive change, we were already 50% of our cars were sold digitally. And so we just had to make the next jump over. And so all of that was done in a very short window of time. But all the infrastructure was there well in advance of that. But because of the auto industry, I think if you'd have maybe done it with any other industry, maybe it'd have crushed or crumbled, or there'd have been more tears. But there certainly was, it's a really neat industry from a Brazilian side, and everyone just adapted, moved, and changed over going into coming out through 2020. And it sets us up for 2021, sets us up for 2022, and on and on and on and on and on. So yeah, lots has changed, certainly from a full out digital, but there's still this human interface as we have even this morning that, yeah, people still want to interact. So here we are.
Super. You know, it's very funny in our pre-show discussions with everybody, with our guests before we went quote unquote live, we mentioned about peak internet times, and I asked Matthew that, and in the old days, like 2 years ago, you know, I understood it to be from about 11:30 to 1:30, and then again from 4 till 5:30 as people prepared to not work, leaving work and lunch or afterwards. But then Matthew answered that the peak time starts around 10:30 and doesn't end till very, very late or early the next morning. So Matthew, how about yourself? Has anything changed for the better, worse, or anything?
It's a complex question. I think there are many things that have changed and many things that have not. And I don't think we're done seeing change. I think, you know, so we have both research that we rely on, research that we do every year, and we kind of look at what consumers want and what they're doing. And then we also have, you know, actual behavioral data, real, you know, statistical data from the back end of Google, so we can kind of see what are the trends. And like The Simpsons said, right, a lot of the ability to predict the future is really, you know, it's really firmly, squarely wedged in the past. So you kind of look at what's been going on, and then you kind of expect some amount of that is going to continue. I think the biggest thing that has really happened that is good to point out, you know, it's actually a bit of an upside, has been that, you know, because people are either not able to get out, either through lockdown states across the country, or because they just don't want to be in public transit or using rideshare, you do have this kind of new audience of buyers that is surfaced that really wasn't there in 2019. And that's, you know, we kind of identified that in our research at Google and other studies. There was a Auto Trader study that came out recently, was in Automotive News Canada, that basically said the same thing, that there's a new car buyer that is either a combination of people adding a second vehicle to their family, right? So it's we had one car, but we need two now because we need to comfortably get around, or, you know, younger, you know, pre-Gen X millennials and the like, who are now, you know, who have deferred buying a vehicle, hadn't really put it off entirely, but had deferred that, and in urban centers were relying on rideshare and transit, and now they can't, or now they don't want to. And so those people have kind of shown up out of nowhere, and that's really been part of the increase in a lot of the vehicle sales. A lot of people seeing some record months once we've kind of come out of lockdown across the country. But then you add to that, the kind of economic forces of while we are at home and in and out of this state, we're not spending money on some other things. And so there's some war chesting being done on a personal basis. So it means we're probably spending more money online. We're probably, if we're in need of a vehicle or want a new vehicle, we're probably ready to make that purchase as soon as we are readily able to do that.
Terrific. Great. Thank you for the input. One beauty about the way we set up this show is today is we have somebody like yourself from the deep down internet world that's driving everything today. We have John, who is the wholesale side for the supply side, we'll call it. And then, of course, we have Paul, who's the retail side. So, Paul, what's really changed? Have you seen any changes yourself last year to this year in the customers?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing I've noticed is just the second time around with lockdown. People are a lot more accepting that this isn't something to use as an excuse to we're going to hold off for see what the future brings for the future sales. So we're getting a lot more people that are coming in, obviously doing as much as they can from home. We started seeing that really tail off with 2020. And I'm a huge believer that, out of every negative experience we have in life, there's positive to come out of it. I think we just shifted the industry that would have been moved in the past years within a year. I think everything needed to move this way online, give that experience to the customer, and let them be as educated as possible. But the biggest thing I've noticed is now that we've gone into lockdown number 2, we're still having steady flow of customers, where the first lockdown really held everybody back. We had about a month in the business where everything went to halt, and you couldn't get anybody to, even chat with, let alone amuse the thought of getting a deal together. But now that we've moved on to the second phase of this, doing the lockdown again, people are accepting that the world's going to keep moving, and we still need cars. And no matter what's going on with the economy, this is going to continue. So used car market obviously shifted a lot. Usually being a 50-50 market's what I've been into. I'm starting to see a lot more into the used market, but I'm sure all you dealers out there having troubles getting inventory has really been that huge part as well. But yeah, biggest part I think would be alone just the acceptance that we're not going to be going through this forever. And as long as it is, we still need to keep moving in the industry, right?
Yeah, that's terrific. Yep. Very, very true. Ian.
Yeah, depending on who you speak to, 2020 was good, was good, bad, or indifferent year. How was it in your eyes and why? And let's start with the Dodge father, being that we just finished with him.
Was it good or bad? Well, I mean, and as I said there, you always got to look at the positive out of it, right? We can all sit here. I've seen a lot of dealers through this past year that just gave the excuse, we're waiting till next year, just wait for this all to be over next year. Well, we're sitting here, guys, and tell me what's changed. Nothing. Like you've got to shift online. I really think that, like I said, it is a positive that customers don't want to be in your showroom for 4 hours anymore. You don't need that overhead of, a 15,000 square foot showroom anymore to impress your customers. They're doing all their research online. You can shift a lot more of that money of your showroom into your service area where they need to be taken care of as well. Valet, constant, maintenance as well. But I think at the end of it all, guys, I'm not one to sit here and drag on it. Like I had an amazing year last year. I feel this year has just started out just the same. And no matter where this industry goes, people are still going to keep buying cars. So 2020 just shifted my aim towards being online even better. I mean, I'm getting customers from even further accepting now, further distance, accepting that they can do their deal basically online. Everything tentative to having the vehicle delivered to their house or seeing it on the driveway or seeing it at the dealership. So I personally, I've kind of enjoyed the way this is because it has shortened the process a lot from having just the average walk-in, come in, go back home and think about it. People are coming in, they're serious. They booked appointments because we're by appointment only. And if you're not closing that deal, you're doing something wrong. So I do believe that at least in my side here, being on the sales floor, I like the way things have shifted, to be honest with you.
Right. John?
Yeah, I think on that same vein of going to the digital side of it, I think as humans, we still want a human touch and we want that interaction for sure. But I think overall, would I want to repeat 2020? Probably not exactly in the same capacity. I think it was a very quick and fast adjustment to team sizes, and we had a large shift in employee count and people and services and lots of anxiety and panic. But I think when everybody came through it, I think it was a great year because it got there were some deeper connections made with people, maybe even on a family side of it, which is an interesting side from the car business, because I think we go full out all the time. And I think we got to the real nuts and bolts of living a life and doing something good for your neighbor and helping out and assisting, and then saying, hey, I still need a car, I still need to buy, and I still need to sell. So people very quickly wanted to get back engaged and back involved. And I think one of the great positives that came out of 2020 is that we see more dealer principals engaged and more involved and having more conversations with them because they're in a part of their day-to-day business, rather than that's somebody else's task. They go look after, whatever, go source us some cars or go get rid of our used cars. They want to be involved in that. And I think that's going to be very, very powerful as we go forward.
Thanks. Matthew?
I think it was a tough year for some people, and it was a great year for others. And then across the board, the whole exercise of 2020 gave everyone a real good reason to look at what they were doing and why. Right. So it's like there was we needed to learn to do some things a little differently to accommodate people and their specific needs at different times of the year. And, that has spun up a bunch of conversations that, are happening at dealership. And they're, I think, and Paul, basically said this, that it's, figuring out how do you expedite that purchase? How do you make the person feel comfortable that everything is as it should be, and really has accelerated that time in dealership. On the OEM side, it's a little bit of the same story, right? They're taking a real serious look at, what services they are offering to their dealers, how they're operating with their dealers, whether they should be, launching some sort of network-wide digital retailing solution, whether they should be allowing dealers to do that themselves. And so I think in the end, yes, the whole exercise caused the dealerships to look at their business and decide what was really important and what wasn't as important, and that's how we see some of this whole profitability exercise coming. It also created a scarcity of inventory, so there wasn't as many perhaps discounts as readily available in market, and so dealers made more money on every vehicle they sold. But in the end, I think the real winners were the consumers, right? Because it did push the industry further, and it did create an environment where, if you wanted to buy a vehicle remotely, whether that was purely through a digital retailing tool or just through a combination of email and phone, now dealers are doing that, and in 2019 that wasn't nearly as common. So I think in the end, there are, yes, there were some winners and there were some losers, but I also see, and you see this in a lot of the news, that people who didn't have their crap together, they decided that was the time they should get out of the business, right? That's when you see the acquisitions happening from the auto groups, and you see, it's almost like there's been some trading of cards between the groups in terms of what stores and where across the country. And again, I think in the end, the winner will be the consumer, because it's those large organizations have the wherewithal to kind of just do what's right and facilitate the sales in the way they need to be done, in regardless of what the condition or the state of the country is, right? So as we kind of go through the current wave, as we look down the barrel at other variants of the virus and a lot of other uncertainty, I think, again, as kind of Paul said, we're all figuring it out. Like we're like, okay, this is how we buy groceries. This is, how we get supplies we need. This is how I go about getting a new car. And it's not as mysterious as it was, say, last March or April.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Appreciate these insights. So, crystal ball time. What do you think the industry is going to achieve this year? I put a comment in there that I just read yesterday that Automotive News says 2020 was the most profitable year ever for dealers. And they said in the States that the average profit was $1.7 million net, which ain't so bad. What do you think we're going to do this year as we look at this? Obviously, other than conquering COVID, which everybody hopes, but I'm going to ask Paul.
I think we're going to see dealers invest a lot more of, well, at least the ones that know what's going on here, into the online market. As everybody sits here and is basically seen, you can sell a car strictly on. I've done a lot of it. I mean, I've sold cars off my Facebook, off my Instagram. I was doing this years ago, but it's becoming a norm. It's really becoming something that these dealers need to stop putting their caveman mindset that they still need to be running ads on the radio. Like, guys, your reach is garbage at that. You can take over online presence, and the people that are going to provide the best experience online. I have built more, I will honestly say, in the past year, doing as much as I have online, working back and forth with the customer, Zoom, video. I have built more of an authentic and genuine relationship with these customers than I think I have ever been able to do in person. Just because you get to know that customer inside and out. And their trust is obviously there a heck of a lot more than when they walk in the showroom, because they got to trust you. If like when we had our first shutdown, I had customers that literally bought the car first time they seen us when I dropped it in their laneway. And if you don't tell me you haven't built trust by that point, it's a different world out there, right? So I just feel that that's where the industry needs to be moving. Like I said, I know personally just how I've grown over the past 3 years. I mean, I smoke veterans on the board every month just off the customer base that you can get. You can literally stop siphoning in your town. You can get, like, I'll go from Woodstock to Windsor. Like, I will siphon a whole area. So your reach is tenfold out there. Start investing in it. That's where I really see the biggest changes. The dealers they're going to win are the dealers that are going to invest their money and their time social media wise. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's a great lead in to go to Matthew. But before that, we always talk about one of our favorite guests who's just a huge success story is Bob Ruth Ford in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, which is in the middle of nowhere in the US. It's not like in Canada. But this little teeny tiny store in a 70-year-old building with no renovations is selling more than some store that he's selling more there than almost anybody here in Canada is, with their massive Taj Mahals, and he reaches out everywhere. So Matthew, what do you think is going to happen this year? What are we going to achieve?
I think there's a bunch of different factors we kind of have to look at together, right? So the first is really, the virus and vaccination. And so, that will, as it did last year, that will kind of dictate whether or not people are comfortable going to dealership and whether or not they need a vehicle, right? If they're at home, then maybe they're not as in immediate need. But there will be, much like last year, pockets where things are going to go back to normal. And then who knows what happens come next fall. It's hard to predict. There's a bunch of unknowns out there with the new variants of the virus. The second trend line I would look at is like the production. So we've got right now, various issues with factory shutdowns and supply, semiconductors and supply. And so similar to last year where, dealers at different times of the year are either flush or not with inventory that they want to sell and can sell. I think we're going to see fits and starts of that throughout the course of the year as well. I think the profitability element of 2020 is going to continue. That dealers are going to make more money on a per vehicle basis, and so that's going to be good news for those who continue to operate. And I can tell you that the consumer interest is there, and so that's why it is kind of the can I, like, we talk about these things often in the context of like moments or questions that people ask, right? Whether they're asking them to me or whether they're asking Google search, but it's the if I can get to a dealership and that's cool, or if the dealership can bring the vehicle to me and that's cool, then that's great. Do I need the vehicle right now or not? Does it make financial sense, right? And so as the consumer answers those questions, I can tell you right now, overall vehicle interest, query interest for vehicles is the highest it's been in years, right? At the beginning of 2021, we're at like 17-18% year over year in query interest. And that's almost unprecedented. That the previous years, the years that I've been at Google, we're usually looking at single digits, kind of 7-8%. Last year, all in, even with the hit we all took during March and April last year, it was still up 11, 12%, depending on market and segment and the like. So I think the consumer interest is there. It's really, do they need to, and are the vehicles going to be in stock?
Perfect. Well, actually, it's funny enough, you guys, we never discussed this in advance, but a perfect lead in for John's input, because I know roundabout probably around May last year, John was sitting there going, oh, there's no new cars and we could sell tons more used to dealers for lots of money. But John, what do you think we're going to achieve this year?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's interesting actually when you, because obviously we don't deal with the retail side of it at all. And so directly, I should say, indirectly, we do lots of interactions on that side of it. But I think to Paul's earlier point of the reach of a retail deal is also the same way on the wholesale end of it, is that dealers are having to source them from a further distance away. And it actually ends up not being that frightening. So it ends up being, I think, an overall, it will help you source more cars if you are willing to go further away than what you've gone in the past. And so from the digital platform, I think it certainly helps us to do that. I think that when we look into 2021, what we've seen more people, or even into the future side of it, is that some of the tools that maybe have been used in the past to know what days to sell, market information for your own backyard was important. But now I think to Paul's point earlier is that your customer is not within your neighborhood. Your customers actually could be across the province. And so we've had more dealers reach out to us now to ask us to deliver, because obviously we have a very large logistics network. So we move a lot of cars in a year to be able to actually deliver their cars to a customer at a further distance. So some of that white glove VIP valet service that would be a concierge type of a system that would help cars get out to that. If you do actually sell a car to a customer that's 5 hours away, what do you do? And have you ever done that before? And some have, and I think some of the higher performing people and some of the higher performing dealerships have always been engaged in the wholesale side. They've always been engaged is putting a number on a car, living by it, dying by it, and knowing when the market changes, you get that upswing, and you certainly get that benefit to your own dealership. If you give it to somebody else and say, listen, I'm not really, I don't know enough of that, and it was a challenge. The one thing we've learned about digital, it's helped us to get more information right to our fingertips than we've ever had before. So I think once people can get on the physical side of it, back to the dealership, back to the auctions, anyways, we see that on how do we share information amongst us, podcasts like this and other information that we can get to dealerships. I think being a part of dealer associations is also another thing, is when you need it, you really need it. Everybody really needed it in 2020, and going into the future, who knows what the next is, but know that you need to expand your reach and expand your customer, look after your customer, and be there in 2021.
Perfect.
What's your best takeaway from 2020 that dealers can apply in 2021? And I'll go with Matthew to start.
Yeah, I think the thing that is, well, so one of the things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about this year, and it's probably not what you expect, or over the last 12 months, not necessarily this year, but over the last 12 months, is not exactly what you would expect. And that's that, one of the other things are the data generally says in terms of consumer research is that more and more, and this has kind of gotten more tighter, more acute every year over the last 4 or 5 years, is that under normal circumstances, people will go do all of the research for a vehicle purchase, and then they effectively surprise the dealer. They just walk in, right? That's the vast majority of people just hitting one store and surprising that sales staff when they walk in. And in the current state, they can't do that. So outside of, the fancy things, like outside of, whether you're using, a social platform or a video platform or a DR tool and all the other things that people jump to very quickly to think like, that's how I'm going to need to sell cars. And it is, you can do that, and lots of people are doing it. Paul used a good example, right? I know there's a lot of people now using video, whether that's, one-to-one kind of over FaceTime or Duo or whatever, or on platforms like YouTube where they're like posting, this is what's going on in store. But I also think one of the easiest ways to kind of solve this remote selling problem is really just to answer the phone. And I know it sounds like a little, I often comment on this. I don't mean to sound like a jerk when I bring this up, but it's kind of like, you've got phones, like stop letting them go to voicemail. Those people in this current state, they need vehicles. This isn't a function of like, if I'm in lockdown in Ontario right now and I'm calling a dealership, that's not out of curiosity, right? I need that vehicle. So there's a lot that can be done to both, measure phone calls using call tracking solutions, whether that's, CallRail, CarWars, Marchex, or even Google call forwarding numbers. And so to use that as a tool to kind of understand, how many calls are actually coming in to your business, where do they come from, and then kind of working and optimizing to get more phone calls, even if that is further afield, even if that is kind of outside of your marketing area, I think is a super powerful exercise for any dealership and their marketing team or agency to kind of look at and think through, because it's a really simple way, and one that we've all kind of forgotten, to use digital to translate those people into actual customers.
Yeah, I like
If
that.
I can interject here for a second, sorry. Matthew,
Yeah.
you bring up something that seems to be a recurring theme in every show, that a lot of these inquiries are actually being ignored and people aren't attending to them. And, like you said, this is the first time I've heard somebody not answering a phone call going to voicemail. And that's really interesting. Do you think that's getting bigger?
I think we're paying more attention to it. And I think it's the exercise of taking every lead opportunity more seriously. So again, it's the things we've talked about for years around, response time to an email, to a form lead, to a phone call, and a realization that, if you are, again, if you look at the example of an Ontario dealership right now, if you get a phone call right now, like that's probably a hot lead. Like that's probably a pretty serious person. And to just let that go to voicemail is basically like telling that person to go away. And they have choice, right? And they can see, assuming dealers are doing a good job of getting their inventory on their websites and sharing that, that's another real clear decision factor. If you've got like two different same brand stores within a reasonable distance of each other, one is paying for the base package website and doesn't have inventory, another paying a few $100s more but updating their inventory daily, like that just makes it really easy for that person to be like, oh well, I can see it's in stock there, I'm going to go to that store. And then if you start shutting them down, then they just keep going, like they just go to the next dealership. And this is not a time when we want to give anyone a good reason to say no. We want every reason to be a good reason to say yes. And I think it's funny, and and I've had this conversation. We've kind of built a little measurement practice around phone call and call tracking that we're sharing with people to try and better understand this. But I was working with a dealer, and they cracked open their call tracking like they used one of these pieces of technology, and they showed me on screen. They're like, these are the phone calls we're getting, and 70% of the phone calls they were getting were coming through Google My Business, of all of the phone calls, not even through their own website. So the getting those things right, like they're little things, making sure that that phone number is up to date, that your hours are up to date, making sure you're getting those phone calls and answering them and not sending them to voicemail. Sounds super simple, but it's going to be the difference between selling that next vehicle and not selling that next vehicle.
Yeah, and I find when I call dealers and I talk to dealers every single day, one of the things that's really, I think, confusing, but not only confusing to customers, but they lose customers, is the fact where they have multiple menus to actually talk to a person. It's like press 1 if you've been here before, press 2 if you bought the car. I mean, it's like, if all they did was have a physical person answer most of those calls, they'd sell more cars. I mean, I know it costs money to have someone doing that, but to your point, if I'm a customer and I'm in lockdown and I need a new car today or a used car today, and I've got 3 stores in the vicinity that have it, I'm probably going to deal with the one who actually answers the phone.
Correct.
In a timely manner. And the funny thing is, it's not all the dealers I talk to have that problem, but some of them, the menus have become their own issue.
And I think
Right.
it's, you know,
It's craziness is what I
it is, you know, especially when you're dealing with the miracle of small numbers. If you're only getting a handful of sales or real interested people a day, then you can probably pay someone to answer those calls, right? And even if it does mean it's, you know, if you don't have your small store and you don't have a BDC and you just are, you know, working with a receptionist, even if that receptionist can, you know, talk to them, like train up that receptionist to get more of the details, so that even if it is, you know, they need to collect some information and get them called back by a salesperson, at least that person feels like they connected with the store, right? Versus it just being a dead end.
agree 100%. Dodge Father, what's your thought on the phone?
Well, I mean, I think obviously in my industry, I'm realizing this is really separating who's hungry and who's not. Um, I realize simple things like we use an app, Rapid Response. I mean, there's no way I should be able to grab them all night. And we're just really realizing who's out there to eat and who's not. And in the same effect, I mean, I know I'm going to have a lot of people that have lost jobs over this get angry at me, but this industry in the past years learned where they need to cut the fat. We have been funding so many areas that they just kind of let, BDC being one of them, where they just kind of let BDC do their own thing. It's, you know, you pay them minimum wage, you let them do their leads. You don't question, why did you lose this lead? Why didn't you inquire more with this lead? How do we, I mean, we're getting more, I want to say almost desperate, not desperate for the deals, but you're having the GMs and the dealer principals put their hands in this a lot more, into the analytics of everything, and really looking down saying, why am I investing my money into this if I'm not getting a return, or why are we losing this? So, I mean, there's a lot of jobs that have been lost that I feel, you know, these jobs should have been worked out years ago, but the industry itself has just been so focused on, we're having an amazing month, we're having an amazing year, just continue with the wheel rolling, rather than where can we make these adjustments to actually continue this to go. And I mean, as a dealer principal, we know that they all run on analytics. When they have 10, 15, 20 dealerships, they don't know everybody as persons, they just know you as a number. So this has really put them under the microscope. And again, I know there's a lot of people out there that have lost their jobs. I feel for them. But in the same sense, we've been able to focus on our customers, if not better than we ever have been before, with skeleton staff, as they call it, giving them a better interaction, a better experience. So, I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding that I hate to say it, we've been just kind of sitting back, letting it roll its way out, when they should have constantly been looking at where are they making these adjustments to better fund the business and to better grow.
Fantastic. John?
Yeah, I guess from answering phones, I say, sure, please answer the phones, for goodness sake. It sounds like a simple thing to do, for frig's sake. So from our business, I think, yes, we would probably get the same grief on our end, but yeah, I think overall, I think you're just talking about managing expectations, really, right? So if you can manage an expectation, say a customer wants X, Y, and Z, if they want a faster transaction, give them a faster transaction. I think from right now, I think from the automotive business, and I think when you talk about the dealer principals that get engaged in the business on a day-to-day level, is that they're able to manage that quicker. And I think when you see the things that come from, even when you go back to the pandemic side of it, is managing expectations to, I actually want a healthier transaction. Yes, I want it simplified, but I want it to be safe. I want it to be clean. I want it to be healthy. If you make it faster, oh man, fantastic. If you make more money doing it, I'm totally fine with that as well. Just make sure that I get what I want. And I think that's back to the basics of really making sure that we do all that we can in our own businesses. And I think the exciting part of going into the future of this is that the growth mindset then looks at each of the steps, all of the data points, all of the data points that are true, that are real, that are factual, that are actually relevant to our day-to-day business. That's the part that say, I don't want a data point that impresses me. I want a data point that changes my business and helps me to grow to the next level, because who knows what's next. We think the pandemic's the worst thing that ever happened, but when you look back in the automotive industry, man, it's not really actually the worst thing that's ever happened. Supply has been challenged in the past, and it will be challenged for the next couple of years, really, when you look at it overall. So yeah, I think it's exciting to see the engagement, even in conversations like this today. The engagement of it is that's phenomenal. So looking forward to an exciting future for sure.
Well, Ian, can I jump in and say something? Is that all right?
You can.
So I mean, I think and so with the whether you're looking at phone calls or you're looking at cost structure, what this really highlights, and what I think, what I've been in more conversations about the last year. In previous years, we've certainly at Google, we talk about it, but, dealers weren't really paying attention to it. They didn't care. And Paul highlighted this with when things are good, it's easy to just not pay attention to things. And I think it really highlights the critical importance of measurement, of kind of knowing what's working and what's not working. And that's across all parts of your business. And that's sort of where are the leads coming from, and how far afield can we go? How much are we paying for them? What is the media that's leading to that? And then how many of those are actually translating to sales, right? So there is this kind of exercise in finally trying to wrap our arms around a lot of the divergent data points that no one has been, everyone has talked about, and everyone's like, yeah, that sounds great, but isn't that impossible? And now people are actually doing it. Like, now people are actually trying to pull in the data from divergent sources and say, okay, well, actually we can clearly see if we, lean in more here, we will sell more vehicles. We will sell more vehicles at a more profitable rate. And again, that comes back to this whole scrutiny, that the whole exercise of, if necessity is the mother of invention, right? We kind of all had to go back. Dealerships had to go back and be like, okay, you're right. Some of these people can't stay here. They need to go because we can't afford to pay them anymore. To be frank, I'm not sure what they were doing before. But then it's also the same on the technology stack. I'm paying for this, and this. I don't even know what those things do. And so should I be paying for them, or should I move on? And so I think that is really going to refine the industry over time into a way of like focusing and looking at, data in a different light, and more people spending more time to understand, these are the actual, this is our North Star. These are the things we need to pay attention to make sure we continue to weather the storm, whether things are good or whether things are bad.
Appreciate that. And John had to go. Sorry about that, but he had pressing things. But thanks, John. And Jeff, you had a final question there?
Yeah, I do actually. I wanted to make just a comment with John. Is everybody comes here and volunteers to come on the show, and obviously we don't pay for it. We don't pay money anyway. But John had to run to go earn some money, so we really appreciate it. Stephen Granger, a friend of ours from way down south, made an interesting comment. And a takeaway that he's noticing here is that over the past year, more and more dealers are getting rid of staff to answer the phones. It's definitely annoying, and both Matthew and Paul have mentioned that too. That what is the big cost saving having auto attendants? But even the fact that BDC people, you're basically paying minimum wage with some bonuses. I worked for a dealer whose receptionist who answered the phone didn't have an auto answer. She was making probably 3 times the amount of money somebody would pay a receptionist. And part of that was because he didn't trust his salespeople, but she did a heck of a job answering that. So seeing as how that's one of my takeaways, and certainly Stephen's, what's your best takeaway from 2020 that dealers can apply to 2021? And Paul, considering you haven't spoken for a minute, how about you?
I think that, just like what everybody's been endorsing here, is make the best out of every lead you can possibly get, and build as much of an experience as you possibly can. One thing I've noticed, guys, I mean, as funny as it is going through this COVID thing, when I first adjusted to COVID, I go to work 12 hours a day. I would go to the gym, barely go to Walmart. So, I mean, for the first 3 months, I didn't even really think COVID changed anything in my life. Like, it was just, I'm still living day-to-day life. And then I remember I finally had to go to Walmart one day, and I'm like, holy, this is like legit. People wearing masks, like we're doing social distancing. And then it was, we started seeing these rules come out, OMVIC come out, putting laws on things. But my biggest thing was judging. Everything was kind of judging customer to customer on how you're going to deal with the interactions. I mean, you still have the people. I would have 80-year-old customers that would come in after and try to shake my hand. I mean, by all means, that's how you do. And then I would have another guy to come in a full hazmat suit to do a test drive. So the big thing is read your customers, because the most you can get out of them is, well, I'll just say, for instance, I had one lady that was an internet lead, or on the phone actually, and basically she was having an awful experience. She just kept saying, during qualifying, I'm having an awful experience with these dealerships. I have a child. What are the measures you're taking to, prevent the spread, and what are you doing to help, make the consumer a little bit better and easy. And I mean, with that alone, I would already be doing the roll of the red carpet, but you read that customer properly, you have the vehicle sanitized, ready for them when they come. Just cut the time down for them and literally have everything ready for them by the time. So you judging customer to customer, I think, is a huge part of this. But read your customer, qualify them well before they come in. If you're getting the gift of a lead right now, guys, there's not many out there. You take them far and few between. You make sure you make the best use of every single one of them, because they're not there just kicking tires anymore, guys. That's one thing that this is filtered out is that, it's Saturday, let's go down to the dealership and see what they got, dream. That's not there anymore, guys. Like, well, because I get the odd guys that'll come out. I'm just trying to get out of the house. You know what I mean? And we still get the odd ones out there, but majority, especially if they're calling, they're putting in the internet lead. Guys, these are serious buyers. And if you're not selling them, somebody is.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, we keep hearing it show after show after show. Take care of your customers, because it isn't like the old days when on a Saturday, a medium-sized store will get 80, 90 people walk through. But of course, in the old days, 80, 90 people were walking from store to store to store, and you got 5% of them were, we would call legit, but everybody's legit. Matthew, how about you? What's your best takeaway?
I think it's the industry realized or got comfortable with the fact that it could change, right? So we were going through a lot of change already, and there was a lot of resistance. And I know it's very different dealer to dealer, and part of country to different part of the country. But I think the two big things that kind of came out of 2021 is, as Paul just said, it's this renewed focus on the individual customer, right? It's like this is how do we handhold someone through this process at a really horrible time in the world, but in a time when they need a new vehicle. So there is this, and that's why, like earlier I said, it's kind of the consumer that wins in all of this. And then it's we've accidentally learned how to get better. Like, it's kind of like the industry suddenly realized that they could test and learn things. And again, that's something that we at Google talk about all the time. And it is very true in more standard omni-channel retail, your kind of Best Buys and your Indigos, like they kind of get this notion of, put the customer first and test and learn and figure out what's working. And that was a little, I might have been beating that drum for the last 6 years, but I think finally people are like, oh crap, we got to test and learn some things. Like, we got to actually go out there and change some things. Otherwise we're not going to be selling any vehicles. And that's what's kind of exciting, because I do think this is, we're seeing a lot of really good movement on, the notion of how do you sell a car online. And the general realization, and I will, and I talked about this a lot last year, especially in the first half around, we realized, or, dealers, some knew this already. It seemed Paul knew this. This is not news for Paul, but that, like, your digital footprint is really the front door to your showroom, right? That it's kind of if you don't have that right, whatever platform that is, that's the first place you're going to lose people. And where people lost people, again, simplest thing ever, they just got their hours wrong on Google My Business, right? It's the simple things that are tripping people up. And so it's kind of this, it's called Google My Business for a reason. It is your business. And it is, if I'm looking for, is a business open? What are their hours? What services do they offer? Whether I'm looking for a dealership or a Thai food place, that's probably where I'm checking first before I even get to their website. So if I'm not getting those things right, then I'm probably just turning a lot of people away.
Well, I know I have another question for you. You brought up something interesting. Again, another recurring theme that we talk about is as dealers building bigger and bigger and fancier dealerships. So with people doing things more online, when is Google coming out with a cappuccino bar?
I mean, we have a cappuccino bar in our office, but I haven't been to the office in a while, so I haven't seen it. But the trick is a little bit, kind of twofold, and that is that those decisions are usually, although yes, I imagine there are some dealers that are like, bigger is better. We need the most massive, floor plan possible. So let's build a giant facility. But a lot of that is also determined or decided by the OEM and refreshes and reconstruction. And so I don't think the dealers are all to blame there. I think the thing we're learning is that, and Paul said this earlier, is that, you know, in a universe where you're delivering the vehicle to the person for the first time and they may not have even seen it, you don't need that showroom, or you don't need the same footprint of that showroom. Uh, and there are lots of models of this. You can see it, you know, you look at, and I resist mentioning them because I know that they're not well loved in the general automotive sphere, but you look at what Tesla does in terms of the simplification of the number of models they sell, and the fact you can walk into a showroom in a mall and they have the three things they sell. Like, it's just like pop, 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 there they are. Which one do you want? And you pick the one you want and they deliver it to you. And I think we're now seeing that model is being replicated more and more in the luxury space. You look at Genesis, you look at, you know, some of the other OEMs, you look at Polestar. This is really, you know, a bit of the new trend. But it then, you know, it's kind of if my showroom is really a combination of my digital footprint and then my ability to, you know, complete that sale in a person's driveway, then it really raises the question of how much space do I need? How much do I need to be spending on that real estate? And am I, you know, in some ways better served by a smaller showroom that's just immaculate and perfect? And then you still have service and the service space, and so there's still, you know, some real estate required. But if all those vehicles were just in a slightly cheaper piece of real estate, just at the edge of town or in the suburbs in the city, there's probably more money to be saved. There's probably more money to be earned, right? So I think there's going to be more experimentation on that. And you look at what some startups are doing in Canada and the US around, you know, various the Carvanas of the world and the like. We've got some examples of this in Canada as well. You know, there's going to be the establishment of purely digital dealerships, right? Again, I think really focused on the used side, because the OEMs aren't quite on side with this yet, or they want to own it if they do it. So, but I think that was, again, something we saw in the research when we asked people, what do you think this whole COVID-19 exercise means for the future of vehicle buying? They said, you know, we are expecting, consumers said, we're expecting more enhanced digital communications. We're expecting options to buy online and remotely. We're expecting vehicle delivery. And we kind of expect that there's going to be more establishment of entirely virtualized dealerships. So.
Thanks for that. Barry, you had a question?
No, just a comment really quickly, and I'm not going to run you over, but just the fact that we're talking a lot about the new leads coming in the front door, but there's a ton of business sitting in your database. Don't be afraid to reach out to them, because what's going to end up happening if you're not careful is you're going to have your new customers who bought in the last 12 months, familiar with how to buy a car in COVID. And then when your 3-year or 4-year lease return comes up, those people are going to come in wanting to buy cars the old way, and you're going to have a lot of confusion of how you're supposed to handle a customer when they come in. So I just say, I'd caution dealers and those on the floor that, you know, just be aware that you need all of your database familiar with your systems, whether they're new, old, or whatever. So don't forget your database. There's lots of people in there.
Thanks.
Well done. Very well put.
Well, and Barry, I would add to that, it's even more important. And, you know, it's, I was on a different podcast a little while ago, and or even I was a recording for a presentation that I gave, and, you know, the moderator asked me, like, what are we not thinking of, and what's the thing that's kind of the elephant in the room? And I said, the real elephant in the room is first party data, is your CRM and what you do with that, both in a traditional sense in terms of mining it for, you know, people who could be, you know, could renew, could get a new vehicle, could, you know, benefit from better terms on their lease, but also using that same data in all of your other digital platforms, right? So pretty much everyone, Google, Twitter, Facebook, they all have some sort of mechanism to allow you to use your first party data. And it's probably the least used feature of any of those platforms. It's in terms of like reach the same people out in the wild. And then it's the lookalike and similar audiences that can be built off that data. And that's been useful, and that's been more widely used in other retail spheres. But as we kind of look down the, you know, the event horizon of a universe where we don't we cannot rely on cookies any longer. Like when we're not using cookies as a mechanism for marketing and remarketing and whatever that is, 18, 24, 36 months, then having a very good handle on your CRM and your first party data is going to be one of the only ways, not only the most effective way, but one of the only ways you're going to be able to market to people in the future.
Yeah, agreed.
And testing us the time, we're pretty much out of time. Obviously, going to be sending out emails around the product showcase vendor speak. Jeff, any final thoughts?
That was a great show. I really appreciate your joining us, Matthew, Paul. We always love to have new people and fresh insights to our show. Very quickly, vendor speak is ramping up really well coming up here for this year. New formats, 3 vendors a show, and we have a lead generation show coming up very soon, which we will be announcing. And hopefully we can reach out to others, perhaps a digital show about digital dealers. Maybe you never know. But thank you all for attending. If you have any quick final comments, we would appreciate it. Matthew, Paul, Dodge. Not terrific. Thank you very much, Ian.
Yep. Thanks very much. Have a great week.
We're all gone. Thank you. Have a great week, great day. Thanks again.
Guys.
Cheers.